What's up? Back at you with another video. Remember just the other day I was mentioning the Daily Wire and I was mentioning its owners, Jeremy Boring and Ben Shapiro. If you know the Daily Wire, if you know what that is, you understand what I'm saying. If you don't, let me give you a bit more context. The Daily Wire is a broadcast media company and it's owned by Jeremy Boring and Ben Shapiro, two very rich, very prominent Jews in the United States who are media entrepreneurs. And Ben Shapiro being more the scholar, the political commentator, you see, somebody in that field. Well, today we're going to be looking at Ernst Roets, who has gone to Ben Shapiro for an interview. They're speaking about South Africa. And if you've also been watching, you will have been picking up lately how I've been informing you about the grift economy. Left-wing grifters and right-wing grifters. You remember, right? We'll see a whole lot of right-wing grifters fall off. We'll see a whole lot of left-wing grifters just fall off. And there will be this economy that black people can participate in. I'm saying, come on to this. Come call things out. You might make it. Yeah, there. So now, this will help you in understanding why Ben Shapiro, somebody that I really admired for the last 5 years or so, me and Shapiro and the Daily Wire and the Candace Owens and the Matt Walsh and the Brett Coopers were pretty much aligned during this previous term where we saw Joe Biden and we saw the rise of pronouns. We saw the rise of the LGBTQ movement. We saw the wokeness movement. I had now, faced with all of that, become a right-winger myself. So if you didn't know, this is an extremely strange time for me because these are a group of people that I once enjoyed listening to and I followed very much. But along the way, that's when I started realizing that, okay, fine, we may be agreeing against the homosexuals. I was strongly against all of those things and their promotion, and I was seeing it become extremely aggressive towards now South Africans also starting to speak and adopt the language and start speaking about pronouns and start suggesting that there should be gender neutral toilets. When I saw that, okay, there's a serious preaching here, there's a serious push, there's a serious indoctrination, me who is spiritual understood that this is something of the spirit. It is the spirit realm controlling the realm of the mortal, the realm of the flesh, and we are now being pumped with over-sexualization and all of these things. So I was in agreement with the Daily Wire squad, extremely so, extremely, to the point where I actually started the podcast, the Illegal Pod, which I was on. That's the name I had for it. I had on a gay dude, a friend of mine, no longer friends today, by the name of Edwin. Why? It was because I had gotten a serious interest in the culture wars that I was seeing online. I was seeing the Ben Shapiros take on those people, and I was seeing the people on the left also defending their right to, sleep with whoever they want and have all their liberties to marry and to adopt children, etc. So now, noting all of these things, I realized that, okay, I agree with them against these incursions. I agree with them on family, marriage. I agree with them on men being masculine and women being feminine. I agree with them on a belief in God. And so I found myself pretty much glued into them. But as I started to listen to them, I started realizing that no, these are racists. These are people who will make jabs at Africans. And I realized that, okay, I'm that African who has been enjoying this American content for quite some time. And now they know their primary audience to be the Americans, and they feel that this content against Africans is nice for their people, but they are not realizing how it's hurting me as somebody who has been agreeing with them, etc. So that's when my awakening, my discernment came into clarity, and that is how I ended up now being able to understand Katlego and the people who are her fans, her victims. You see, it's people who are for now agreeing with something that they are hearing, but in time you will start to hear that, nah man, this food tastes nice, but from time to time I'm finding hair in it. From time to time I'm finding a snail in it. From time to time I'm finding a roach in it. It's so nice, but so disgusting at the same time. And that's why I finally decided, you know what, this whole alignment with people for the purpose of being against others is something that is just not vibing with me. As I become an adult, I'm getting over certain things. So now we are here watching the Daily Wire. And in light of what I've been telling you about grifts, the Daily Wire is facing a very serious problem. Jeremy Boring, whom I mentioned earlier, has stepped down as the co-CEO of the Daily Wire, and he has departed. And there are videos now talking about the bankruptcy of the Daily Wire, the fact that this was a right-wing media business that was actually funded more so by billionaires, people with money. They donated to the Daily Wire so that the Daily Wire can fight against wokeness, etc.
Apparently, there's an implosion taking place inside of the Daily Wire. I don't know the veracity of these claims, but turns out they're hiring a bankruptcy attorney and also laying off 25% of their staff. Obviously, we're going to be talking about that today. This is something that your boy has been talking about for quite a bit, as a matter of fact. You guys know this already. I've been talking about right-wing commentary and where right-wing commentary has moved in the world of enshittification for quite a bit.
But since now there's been Israel and the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring being Jews, also being accused of being Jewish supremacists, Zionists, with Israel now at war with Hamas and bombing innocent people, a lot of people who were donating money in favor of the conservative views, the anti-LGBTQ stance, they're finding themselves now opposed to Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire because of him being a Jewish supremacist and him now standing in full support of people's killing.
The reality of the matter is Daily Wire was always propped up by billionaires and millionaires alike, and it was never going to be a self-sustaining operation. They took some big hits in the process with Candace Owens, who came out and was overtly anti-Israel. That was a big no-no. Not the anti-Semitism, mind you, but the anti-Israel perspective was bad. I also told you Brett Cooper was the only one with motion at the Daily Wire. I told you, Ben Shapiro, no motion. He's out, desperately trying to cultivate the edgy boy population to the best of his ability while he still cries about Israel every goddamn day. It's not going to happen. The edgy boys have moved on. They want anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment. Make no mistake.
And so a lot of donors have withdrawn their money, and so the Daily Wire is in trouble. And them being in trouble, they're now having to get as much an audience as possible. Candace Owens left not long ago, well, quite some time ago, over a year ago. I was watching a previous video where she said it's been a year now since she left the Daily Wire.
And here is the proof in the pudding. Let's take a look at Ben Shapiro's videos. Oh my God. Barely cracking. Derek Chauvin, 19,000 views. 19,000 views. Derek Chauvin's trial was nothing short of mob rule. He is so desperately trying to bring back the edgy boys because he knows this is what they want. This is what the audience demands. He's like, well, you see, I actually want to make sure that, everybody understands that I am a racist indeed.
Brett Cooper has also departed the Daily Wire. So it's all shambles now. There's problems. There's a fire behind the scenes. And the Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro need some new fire. They need some new material. They need a new woke mind virus to attack so that money can keep coming in now. They need the support of Afrikaners to donate money to them now because those who are funding them from the USA have now backed away. That's why now at the bottom of the Daily Wire, as things are going to the toilet, Ernst Roets is here with some of his well-known conspiracies about South Africa, and we're about to quickly listen to those now. I hope you understand.
Dr. Roets, thanks so much for stopping by. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
So for our listeners who are not familiar with South Africa, they might be seeing a tweet from President Trump here or a tweet from Elon Musk, but they don't actually know the roots of South African history. And so they look at the racial issues that have arrived there, and they have sort of a left-wing view that's been drilled into them that essentially this is just a matter of decolonization, colonialism. Why don't we go back to the beginning? What are Afrikaners doing in South Africa?
Well, thank you, Ben, for having me on the show. So the Afrikaners' history in South Africa goes back to 1652, which is before the Declaration of Independence. So we've been there for hundreds of years, almost 400 years. It started initially as a settlement or a refreshment station in the Cape, where Cape Town is today. And eventually they were joined by other groups coming in from Europe, French, Germans, and then, I mean, it's in smaller numbers, initially some other groups as well. Later the English came, so we have a big white Anglo community in South Africa. And we've been there for hundreds of years. We're not Dutch anymore. We have developed our own culture. We have our own language. We named ourselves after the continent. We are the Afrikaners. Our language is Afrikaans. And we have our own literature, our own poetry, our own philosophy. We have all these things that we have had again, developed for hundreds of years. And over time, obviously in any country like this, our history is very similar to the American story in a sense. Also with the pioneers, the great track that we had into the interior. In America, you had the track to the west. So, and there's, in a story like this, there's always friction, and it's almost like news. People like to focus on the friction and ignore the cooperation. But there were incredible stories of cooperation between communities in South Africa. But when you talk about history in South Africa now, you're only allowed to talk about the friction. When the truth is that we've had a long history of cooperating with communities and so forth. And yes, one thing led to another. The Cape was colonized around the time of the Napoleonic Wars by the British. We then moved in towards the interior. We had some battles. We had some treaties. We bought land. There were some areas that weren't settled. You're not allowed to say that, but South Africa wasn't densely populated back then. We started the Boer republics, the Transvaal and the Free State, which led to the Anglo-Boer War after gold and diamonds were discovered. After which South Africa became a union in 1910, which means all the republics, the kingdoms of the African tribes and so forth, the colonies, everything was combined into one big whole, which became South Africa. And then of course we had the apartheid history, and this is a very quick overview, leading to the negotiated settlement in 1994, which...
And just a quick one to link this up with Ike Khumalo, if you've been following, right? You saw when the Daily Maverick did a documentary about solidarity being in the United States, they showed that there weren't really mainstream media outlets that accommodated these guys. So these guys went and met Joel Pollak, and then they went and met Colonel Chris Wyatt. Let's keep going. That's who they met with. See, they're now providing pictures of who they met with, and it's a friend in the media.
Other than a video posted by Jaco Kleinhans of him being interviewed by a right-wing podcaster in a Starbucks.
Do you see who that is? That's the Easter egg. I told you. That's Colonel Chris Wyatt over there. You can see them there talking to him. So AfriForum Solidarity are going to the United States and going to right-wing podcasts. And you are finding a black man from Soweto who says that he has some kind of struggle credentials. You're finding them right in the middle of all of this. What is going on? I can tell you that next probably to go on Colonel Chris Wyatt's show would be Mandisa Mashego, somebody who was chairperson of the EFF in Gauteng, now turned into a grifter because that was the height of her career. Go and Google search images of Mandisa Mashego. You will see that 99% of the pictures of her taken available on the internet are her in the EFF. Post the EFF, there's pretty much nothing. She has become irrelevant. And so she will be finding her relevance in the midst of these things over here because it's a popular subject right now and people need some money.
To this new South Africa, which was celebrated all over the world as a miracle, and it was sort of the shining example of what the United Nations can do to save a country. And the Constitution was celebrated, and now we are here, where it turns out that story, this miracle story, was not as shining as people would have liked it to be.
And I think it's that part that is puzzling to people because they've been taught the miracle story. They've seen the movies about Nelson Mandela. They've seen the films and TV shows about the great moment when apartheid ended. And there's sort of been a ban publicly on talking about the problems that exist in South Africa post that, because to mention that there are some fairly significant problems, as it turns out, in post-apartheid South Africa is seen as some sort of endorsement of apartheid itself, which is a false binary.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the problem that we have, is we have this narrative that you can choose between the apartheid system and the current system. And there's only those two options. You have nothing else to choose from. And so you have to choose what's currently happening in South Africa. And if you don't choose that, or if you say this is a problem, that by definition means you want to go back. You want to go to the apartheid system, which no one wants to do. The fact is that the apartheid system didn't work. The current system isn't working, and we need something else. We need a better system. But we are very happy that a lot of people are taking note about what's happening in South Africa, because this has been going on for decades. And I think the pendulum has swung so far to the one side or to the left, you could say, that it's the narrative about South Africa has become so detached from the realities on ground level that it's just not possible to ignore what's happening in South Africa. And so we're grateful that people are talking about this, and people should be talking about it more.
So let's talk about the history of South Africa since the end of apartheid. Again, that's where most people's story ends, is end of apartheid, happily ever after. What has actually happened? What were the political transformations that took place in South Africa after the settlement of 94?
Well, one way I think to understand what's happening is the negotiations for the new South Africa started immediately after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and that was the end of history era, and there was a sort of a narrative that capitalism and liberalism has won, and it's going to be the gold standard all over the world eventually, and we need to write a constitution for South Africa along these lines. And the problem with that in South Africa is that it's a very big country. It's very diverse. It's more like Europe than like the US in a certain sense. It's almost as big as Western Europe at least, and it's many diverse nations and peoples living there. And so the ruling party, the ANC, back then they said the way we're going to do this is we want what they call a national democratic revolution, and that essentially means using democracy as a way to promote socialist ideals. And the way they did that, they said it's going to be a two-phase revolution. Phase one is present ourselves as very liberal, very open-minded, very pro-democracy to get more and more support in South Africa and all over the world, and which worked obviously brilliantly. And then the theory or the strategy that they wrote it out, it's all on paper. They said that once we have the power, or the levers of power, as they put it, then we should eventually move to the second phase of the revolution, and that means using the state mechanisms to become much more aggressive in implementing socialist policies. And so the first big one was 1996 with in America you call it DEI, we call it BEE, which is Black Economic Empowerment, but it has nothing to do with empowerment. It's handing out social grants, and it's discriminating against people who aren't black. So they started with that in 1996, which became more and more aggressive over time, up to the point where there are now more than 100.
So you understand, according to the accepted definition of right-wingers, is the inclusion and promotion of people who are systematically excluded, where apartheid lifted people by race and put people behind, fixing that situation by addressing the racial disadvantages of black people, by giving specific focus to healing them who have been hurt. You are ignoring those who are healed. You are ignoring those who are not hurt. Why are you busy giving attention to those who have injuries? Isn't that discrimination towards those who are well and proper? Should everybody not get medical treatment? Why is it for the injured? Why is reparation and redress something for the black people? Why are you dressing the wounds of the black people? Shouldn't you go and address the wounds of everybody else who is well and healthy? That's the argument.
140 race laws in South Africa today. So that was one strand. Another strand was the property rights thing, where they said in 2018, we're going to start a process to change the property rights clause in the constitution so that the state can expropriate private property without compensation, which is just confiscation of property. So that's another strand. And then there's also the strand of the hate speech and real hate speech. I mean, actually targeting a group of people, identifying them based on their ethnicity, and then saying we need to go out and kill those people. It's not offensive speech. It's calling for the Boers to be slaughtered. And that's combined with political speeches, with statements such as, and this is a direct quote, all white people are criminals and they should be treated as such. And then these politicians would burst out chanting, kill the Boer, kill the farmer. And the Boers, of course, a reference to the Afrikaner people. And this has been getting worse and worse and worse, up to the point where, again, as I said, you cannot ignore what's happening in South Africa. But what's really strange is how people are in South Africa, and unfortunately in America and some other places, are trying to deny the existence of the problem by saying it doesn't exist. But so the farm killings, you have the name.
So if the problem exists, why are you and Colonel Chris Wyatt not in possession of footage and statistics? Where's the science in all of this? You guys are white. You guys went to school. You guys know how to give citations, some evidence. Why is there this sort of reluctance, this not following things by the book, how we would actually expect intelligent people to operate? You're not operating like that at the current moment. You're operating like a flat earther. Somebody who says, I'm telling you, the earth is flat. People can deny it all they want. This is Alex Jones. We live in a time where we've seen Alex Jones. We've seen conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists. And so these men have a place in society because bigger conspiracy theories have come and they've remained and they stand till today. So we just have to deal with these people and oppose them and ask them for the evidence they have, if they have it. If they don't have it, we'll ask them in the next video, in the next interview on another right-wing podcast. That's how we just roll.
Names of the people who have been murdered. I mean, I knew people who have been murdered on farms. And for someone to say, well, this problem doesn't exist, it's really, really bizarre.
So let's talk about the details of that, because a few years ago, this started to pop up in the news. I remember we covered it on the show at the time. That's when you and I first got in contact, actually. Mm-hmm. And the take from the media is that, statistically speaking, it's not a big deal. People are being killed at kind of the normal rate that people are killed. There's a comparison between the rate of killing of farmers in rural South Africa to the rate of killing of people in Johannesburg, which is notorious for having significant violence problems. Talk a little bit about that. What's been happening with the killing of farmers?
Well, the counter argument that you presented now is based on the idea that there are other problems as well, therefore you shouldn't talk about this problem. And the people who are saying this is a problem, we should do something about this, are not saying that there aren't other problems. And so one, just to point out that
you see people who are against BEE and a particular paying attention to a group of people's problem, black people's problem, are the ones who will say that there is wrong, these are race laws, and then they will say pay attention to a specific crime that is claimed to occur to white people in particular. Remember earlier they said, why are you paying attention to and giving state funds to the injured? Isn't that a crime against those who are healed? Now they would say pay attention to the Afrikaners, give them extra security, but they won't say that would be marginalization of the whites. This is how a satanic brain just operates on a normal day, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go.
lunacy in this is one way to respond to this is there's a big problem in South Africa with the poaching of rhinos. But no one is saying, why are you talking about rhino poaching? You are discriminating against elephants that are also being poached. The fact is that rhinos are poached in disproportionate numbers and it has very particular consequences.
And blacks are disadvantaged in disproportionate numbers. Land ownership is in disproportionate numbers. Schooling and availability of education is disproportionately against the black people and so much more in favor of the white people who are employed and educated. So you see how his brain goes back and forth, and he has no shame at all. You can see his face. He has no shame at all.
To say that the farm murders have to stop is not to say that there isn't gang-related violence in Johannesburg or Cape Town. But as far as the murders are concerned, it started in 1990 and it gradually got worse. And there's been some debate on how to calculate it. If you use the police statistics, I think the police data is quite accurate in terms of the murders, but not in terms of the attacks. The attacks are much more like this shadow number that you don't know of than what the police say. But according to police data, if you look at a period of 2 years, there were 2 farm attacks every day in South Africa, during which 2 people were murdered every week. It's been going on and on and on up. And it's a small community. The farming communities, there are about 30,000 commercial farmers in South Africa. So it's a small community. And if you're a farmer in South Africa, you know people who have been murdered. That's just the reality. Or you have been attacked yourself. And I personally know people who've been attacked, people who've been killed and so forth. So that's the one aspect, is just the rate at which it's happening. The second aspect is the brutality. And it's the worst tortures you can imagine. Really, I can't think of worse methods of torture than the ones that we've seen in South Africa, with gorging out of the eyes. We've had one farmer where I grew up, they had a shower nozzle turn up on its the highest, warm water. They shoved the nozzle down his throat. And there are many, many, many such examples. I mean, I can go on. Every torture you can imagine has been applied during these.
And these are race-based murders.
And y'all saw the people at that Zanzu place, right? Y'all saw how those people there were being tortured and being made to fondle themselves with beer bottles. You saw that, right?
So not all the victims are white. The victims are people of all races. I'm not aware of a black farmer that has been tortured. So it's a big phenomenon, and a lot is happening, and surely not all of them are politically motivated. Some of them certainly are, and we know that because sometimes the attackers write political slogans on the walls during these attacks. Or they would chant slogans, and then the survivors would come and say, the attacker said something like, "Die white man, Viva Malema," who's the politician who's chanting this, "Kill the boer, kill the farmer." So some of them are obviously and overtly politically motivated, and some of them probably aren't, or some of them aren't, but we don't know those statistics.
And I've heard the opposition to this killing, where somebody will actually take ownership and write a slogan that says "Viva Malema," "Kill whites," etc. Criminals don't typically do that. They commit and run from the scene. That was such a strange thing that it was suggested, no, the crime might have happened, and I think this is a crime that had happened, but for the conspiracy theories to make a meal out of that murder, they got to the scene quickly and wrote that there so that this can be said in interviews since then till today as you find it there. I don't know. You tell me if you have any evidence in favor of what he's saying.
In terms of the motivations, but it's very, very alarming.
So when it comes to the politics here, and the excuse that you hear in the world media is when you see videos of Malema saying "kill the boer," number one, you'll hear, well, he doesn't actually mean it. It's just a song. Who cares? Which is absurd on its face. But the other thing they'll say is, well, he's part of a party that isn't actually the governing party. ANC is the governing party. So why are we focusing so much on Malema, for example? Isn't ANC just fine?
Yeah. So he is.
Julius Malema is known by Ben Shapiro, y'all. Is he really a clout chaser, Julius, or is he worthy to be known? Hasn't he been an active political political figure in South Africa for a very long time. Did we not have the Daily Mavericks when he was opposing Zuma, giving him coverage as the firebrand politician, etc., etc., etc.? Then Zuma left and they stopped giving him attention. So Julius has been made by the media. He has made himself and he has been helped. He is who he is.
Some people have called him the most influential, I think that's an exaggeration, but some have called him the most influential politician in Africa. He's certainly one of the most influential, and certainly in South Africa. His party has had some difficulty in the last election. But the thing is, ideologically, he's not far away from the EFF. In terms of rhetoric, he's much worse. I mean, he's not far away from the ruling party, from the ANC. In terms of rhetoric, it's worse. And so a few years ago, he made a speech where one of the statements he made during that speech was, we are going to slit the throat of whiteness. And then everyone was applauding. And then 2 days after, the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, publicly said, we invite this guy to come back and join our party because we can see that deep down in his heart, he's still a member of the ANC. So we do find that the ruling party is a bit more subtle.
Cutting the throat of whiteness. They were talking about dethroning Athol Trollip. They said that he's an arrogant racist. I think he was the mayor of Port Elizabeth, and Julius said that they were going to remove him in a motion of no confidence, and so they eventually did remove him. Whiteness is not a term that the EFF came up with. Whiteness is a defined term. It's a known state of a lot of white people's minds. The realization of, or they're getting indoctrinated into myths of supremacy. And so when a person is genuinely walking around and he's a white guy, he really feels that he's the one that God made this earth for, and everyone else was made to be a servant to him. His skin is glory. It's the Champions League medal. It's the World Cup trophy. And that's walking around with whiteness in your head. It's a myth. It's a delusion.
Approach, although just as racist in terms of the policies that they are implementing. And then we have these parties to the left of them that are much more radical. But again, ideologically, there's not much of a difference. They both, the ruling party and the EFF, think of people like Robert Mugabe as a hero. Mao Zedong, they think is a hero. Joseph Stalin, even Maduro. They go all these Fidel Castro, all these communist examples. And then they would not only say that these people are heroes, they would say we need to duplicate their policies. We need to bring their policies. But in South Africa, it's going to work. In as far as they would be willing to concede that it hasn't worked, they would say this time it's going to work.
Well, that's all for now, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe.
Yeah, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I will be seeing you in the next one.